ethnic cleansing is being carried.
The UN General Assembly resumes as Palestine's envoy condemns Israel and calls for a ceasefire and statehood. The Israeli army warns Lebanese residents against traveling south, citing safety risks. And Macron's government falls after a no-confidence vote for the first time since 1962.
Et pour sortir de l'impasse dans laquelle a placé le pays, le président de la République, eh bien, il ne reste qu'une solution.
It's exactly 4 p.m. car local time and you're watching Qnews. We begin today's bulletin with the latest developments in Gaza. The United Nations General Assembly has resumed its emergency session on Gaza, with Palestine's UN representative Riyad Mansour delivering a strong condemnation of what he described as Israel's ongoing genocide. Mansour also criticized attacks on UN institutions and violations of international law, calling for an immediate ceasefire and an end to what he termed massacres. He urged the enforcement of International Court of Justice rulings, emphasizing the need for Palestinian self-determination and the establishment of a sovereign state based on the 1967 borders, with East Jerusalem as its capital. He concluded by underlining the urgency of ending decades of occupation and apartheid.
And upholding the rule of law, of protecting civilians and achieving justice for victims.
The head of the Palestinian Red Crescent Society, Younes al-Khatib, has condemned Israeli actions obstructing humanitarian efforts in Gaza, calling for an immediate ceasefire and unrestricted access to aid. Speaking at a conference in the central West Bank, al-Khatib stressed the need to uphold international law to safeguard civilians and humanitarian workers. The event also paid tribute to 21 PRCS staff members who lost their lives since October the 7th of the year 2023, highlighting the vital role of volunteers and calling for their protection worldwide. Israeli occupation forces have bombed a house in Gaza's Nusayrat camp, killing 3 civilians and injuring several others. Airstrikes also targeted Gaza City, Rafah and Khan Yunis, while intermittent shelling hit El Maghazi camp. Rescue crews in the Al Junaina neighborhood recovered 3 bodies amid the destruction. The attacks across central and southern Gaza have left widespread devastation and numerous casualties. An Israeli airstrike on Gaza City's Sheikh Radwan neighborhood has killed 10 Palestinians, injuring others after targeting a house. That comes as Israeli occupation forces detained 28 Palestinians across the West Bank, including children and a wounded individual taken from hospital. The raids involved home destruction, assaults and threats. Jordan's King Abdullah II has urged an end to settler violence against Palestinians and the immediate cessation of violations of Jerusalem's holy sites. Earlier in Washington, he called for a Gaza ceasefire, a two-state solution, and a sufficient humanitarian aid. Meeting U.S. lawmakers, Jordan's king emphasized the need for sustained relief access in Gaza, support for Lebanon's ceasefire, and stability in Syria. Amnesty International has reported that Israel has committed genocide against Palestinians in Gaza. The organization called for urgent international call, citing evidence from its research that Israel continues these crimes systematically and with impunity during this year-long military offensive. Their report described Israel's actions as unleashing devastation and horror upon Palestinians.
That is more than a year ago. The Palestinians of Gaza have been held in a nightmare.
Gaza-based health authorities have announced that the death toll from Israeli attacks on the Gaza Strip has climbed to over 44,500, with over 105,700 wounded. Medical reports said that Israeli occupation forces committed 5 massacres against families in the Gaza Strip over the last 24 hours, which killed at least 48 Palestinians and injured 201 others. Donald Trump's Middle East envoy, Steve Witkoff, is conducting diplomatic visits to Qatar and Israel ahead of the U.S. presidential transition, aiming to facilitate a Gaza ceasefire and detainee release before January the 20th.
Donald Trump's Middle East envoy, Steve Witkoff, has embarked on diplomatic visits to Qatar and Israel ahead to the U.S. presidential transition. In late November, Witkoff, set to assume his role under Trump's administration, held separate meetings with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Qatar's Prime Minister Sheikh Mohammed bin Abdulrahman Al Thani. His primary focus is facilitating a ceasefire in Gaza and securing the release of detainees before Trump's inauguration on January 20th. These efforts come over 14 months of unsuccessful negotiations aimed at establishing a lasting ceasefire between Israel and Hamas and addressing the release of detainees. While the Biden administration is aware of Witkoff's engagements, it has emphasized that it remains the primary actor leading negotiations for a Gaza ceasefire. The Biden administration does not view direct coordination with Witkoff as necessary, considering his efforts more exploratory than formal. Previously, Trump issued a warning of severe consequences should detainees in Gaza remain captive by his inauguration. Secretary of State Antony Blinken characterized Trump's statement as underscoring the urgency for a ceasefire and detainee release, a priority echoed across political divides. The Gaza situation highlights the pressing need for a ceasefire as diplomatic efforts gain momentum. Both immediate measures and sustained strategies are critical to preventing further escalation and addressing the ongoing humanitarian crisis.
And for more analysis, we now move to Karim in our newsroom. Karim?
Thank you, Rana. And we are joined now from Hebron by the international law professor, Dr. Bassem Al-Qawasmi. Welcome, Doctor. Now, first of all, how do you comment on Riyad Mansour's statements at the General Assembly, especially regarding his criticism towards UN institutions and the international community for not upholding their responsibilities and roles towards protecting civilians in the Gaza Strip and the violations of international law as he described it?
Violations are committed and the mass genocide against the Palestinian people are committed before the whole world. All international institutions affirms that, and the UN reported it, and the other organizations affirmed it, the catastrophe and the gross crimes committed against the Palestinian people. Here is a responsibility should be shouldered by the United States of America, all European countries, particularly those who support Israel with arms. What's taking place in Gaza, it's about a real test for the international human law and human rights, and all organizations and international institutions, as well as the ruling part, the ruler throughout the world, as the crimes committed before or against the Palestinian people are committed before everyone. Yet those countries are rhetoric by democracy and the law role support the Israel. More than 13,000 Palestinian children were killed. Many of them were in schools, asleep, or in the refugees camp, as well as at the shelters. The women are killed, houses demolished above the inhabitants, and the premature babies in the NICU are killed. Senior people are killed, as well as the worshipping houses are demolished. These horror and appalling crimes committed against the Palestinian people generates an international responsibility. The orientation of these countries that support Israel with arms and provided an umbrella for the United States of America and the European countries should reconsider the instances, as it is a big shame before the humanity. We are living in the 21st century, but no crimes in this century were committed. Why is this silent? Why this cover and the violation of the international law? Why?
Right.
They are waiting. They listen daily basis to the Israeli statement issued by
in regard to that, and to what you've said previously also, Amnesty International has reported that Israel has committed genocide against Palestinians in Gaza. Now, what kind of measures should be taken by the UN in light of these reports, and what kind of measures should be implemented, and moving from just reporting and reading these reports into taking action and implementing them in regard to violations of international law and humanitarian law also?
Issued and are issued by all the international institutions, resolutions by the International Court of Justice, the UN General Assembly resolutions, and then reported before or from the all international institutions. Despite that, all what is committed before the eyes of all these institutions, but the double standards of the decision making to provide impunity for Israel, or to prevent, should they prevent him of committing this crime? The Israelis are taking undergoing, as always, under the umbrella of the United Nations. Despite that, the crimes are committed. The U.S. should reconsider such a policy. The U.S. taxpayers shouldn't pay taxes for financing the genocide wars against isolated women and children in the Gaza Strip and the West Bank.
But Dr. Bassem, the UN reports are stating that there's genocide in the Gaza Strip. That's a war crime according to the UN Charter. Now, what kind of measures or steps could the Palestinian envoy, for example, at the United Nations, could take to take advantage of these reports?
Envoy is always hidden before the United Nations and to take a decision and to issue a determinant and to commit Israel not to commit such crimes. But unfortunately, some of the political stances of some countries prevent this. That would give a green light for the Israeli authorities to continue in practicing such a genocide. We shouldn't forget that there was US vetoes always been used to condemn the Israeli authority for the United Nations, all the free world, those who are concerned about the human rights and wish to preserve the lives of children should resort to the 7th article of the United Nations Charter to take a very clear resolution based on the 7th article of the United Nations Charter to commit, or rather to abide Israel not to commit such crimes and not to use the veto right by the United States or some supporters of Israel.
All right. Finally, Dr. Bassem, finally, what kind of implications or results can the General Assembly resolutions have on pressuring the international community? We know that the resolutions passed by the General Assembly are not quite effective as the Security Council resolutions, but can they have any kind of pressure?
Nations resolutions has the feature of unabiding, but those resolutions coming from the United Nations based on the 7th article that and what prevents this to be taken is the US veto. We hope that the US policy to change its policy with as such and should have an American boldness to say the truth. We all know that the killing operations were made in the 7th of October, and as we also condemn killing civilians from each party, so the Palestinian stance demand is just again its independent state and the Palestinian rights, and to live in peace and security with the neighboring country. We are against the killing, but the genocide that is committed against the Palestinian people, against these people that are longing for to get their rights as the peoples of the whole world. The whole world should stand beside these people that is getting killed. Their homes are demolished. Gaza became inevitable, and the infrastructures is destroyed, and whoever is not killed by the Israeli bombardment using the US aircraft such as F-15 and F-16s are dying because of hunger, because of the dissemination of diseases, because of the cold.
Right.
Gaza is just like a great and a big prison. All people are suffering badly. We never seen a human catastrophe in this century as it happened in Gaza.
Right. Thank you very much. Unfortunately, I'm out of time. That was the international law professor, Dr. Bassem Al-Qawasmi. Thank you for your insights. And now back to you, Rana, in our
Kareem, and now we move to the latest developments in Lebanon.
كل المستهدفين هن مدنيين.
وضع شيء مرعب، شيء بخوف.
The Israeli army spokesperson for Arab media has notified the residents of Lebanon that they are prohibited from traveling south to 10 villages. He added that anyone traveling south of this line is putting themselves in danger. Additionally, he warned residents to refrain from returning to 50 villages. Lebanon's official national news agency has reported that civil defense teams in Naqoura came under artillery fire carrying out debris removal operations. Residents of Beirut's southern suburbs, as well as civil defense teams, have been assessing the damage to their neighborhoods as they look to start rebuilding homes and businesses damaged by Israeli strikes before a ceasefire. The Lebanese civil defense has continued its search and recovery operations in several villages and towns of Tyre district, which were impacted by Israeli forces. Since the ceasefire began, the civil defense, in a cooperation with the Red Cross and with support from the Lebanese army, has recovered the bodies of 9 individuals from Shama, 6 from Badia, and 1 from Naqoura. Moving on to France, where France's left-wing France on Both Party has demanded the resignation of President Emmanuel Macron minutes after his government, led by Prime Minister Michel Barnier, crashed down through a vote of no confidence approved by opposition lawmakers in the National Assembly. Far-right and left-wing lawmakers joined forces to back no confidence motion against Barnier and his government, with a majority of 331 votes in support of the motion. No French government has lost a confident vote since Georges Pompidou's in 1962. Macron ushered in the crisis by calling a snap election in June that delivered a polarized parliament. The French National Assembly has passed a no-confidence vote, forcing Prime Minister Michel Barnier to resign, supported by 331 deputies from the New Popular Front and National Rally. The vote exceeded the 288 required. Barnier, criticized by bypassing Parliament on the 2025 budget, is the first Prime Minister ousted this way since 1962. And moving on to South Korea, where the Vice Defense Minister Kim Seon-ho has set former Defense Minister Kim Yong-hyun, who resigned over President Yoon Suk Yeol's bid to impose martial law, had ordered the deployment of troops to the parliament. Kim Seon-ho has said no live ammunition has been provided by those troops. South Korea's parliament introduced a motion on Thursday to impeach Yoon over a botched attempt to impose martial law, while the defense minister blamed for advising the move and ordering troops to the parliament resigned. Protesters have gathered outside South Korea's National Assembly as opposition lawmakers announced plans to impeach President Yoon Suk Yeol over his failed martial law declaration. Yoon's move on December the 3rd, aimed at consolidating power, sparked public outrage and international concern. The defense minister resigned, while opposition lawmakers plan an impeachment vote, and Yoon's ruling party remains divided but opposes impeachment with 2 years left in his term. That brings us to the end of our news bulletin. Here's what we have been covering. UN General Assembly resumes as Palestine's envoy condemns Israel, urges ceasefire and statehood. Israeli army warns Lebanese residents against traveling south citing safety risks. And Macron's government falls after a no-confidence vote, first since 1962.
Et pour sortir de l'impasse dans laquelle a placé le pays le président de la République, eh bien, il ne reste qu'une solution. Nous demandons...
This concludes our news bulletin for the hour. Don't forget to follow Qnews on YouTube, Facebook, X, Instagram and TikTok at QNewsEG to stay informed. Thank you for watching and stay tuned for more updates on Qnews.